Okay, I'm Alan Key. I'm the Managing Director of Earth Trade. We specialise in biodiversity offsets. And Helen Wood. Helen's the...
I'm a Senior Environmental Advisor at Cenex Energy, and I undertook an offset in the last 2 years with the help of Earth Trade.
So we're going to go through this quite quickly to keep to moving schedule, and I'm going to just build on what Chris has said. Offset delivery involves risk, and that's, you can't mitigate all of the risk by writing a 130-page pragmatic management plan. Okay? That should start some fights, but anyway. But so what we're going to talk about is based on our Queensland experience. We've done quite a number of offsets in Queensland. We've got a very strong regulatory framework at the Australian Government, Queensland Government level, of course, which gives you some certainty, but the risk that mitigates some of the risk, but some of the risk that we're looking at, and again Chris touched on it, you've got project risk. Most of our projects are tied to the commodity cycle. So you start, then you stop, and so there's project risk there that is not part of, it's got to be recognised as part of the process, especially when things are drawn out. The other thing is that from a project perspective, and again Chris touched on this, you've got your time frame risk. These things can take a lot of time to source, secure, which comes back to another major risk, is that you need policy certainty so you know what you're looking for. Okay, it's very difficult to go out and find an offset site if the project proponent doesn't know what they're offsetting. So if there's any one thing that we need to do first is actually tidy up that. So that's the second point, is that policy and framework must provide certainty. So you know what you're looking for, the time frame you're looking at it for, and have a pretty good handle on how long it's going to take to go through the process. Metrics or ratios. I don't know, there's a lot of to and fro on this. I can see both sides of, you know, the complex metrics that you're trying to take in all of these factors that are probably not able to be taken in, but all of this leads to the uncertainty as well. Ratios like they use in the UK and in Europe, and we used to have here as well, at least gives you some certainty. If you've got a ratio of 4, at least you can say, I'll bank on the worst case scenario. Offset sites, and this touches on something that Chris touched on as well, offset sites should be managed for the outcome. Perpetuity is a really difficult thing. I totally understand the requirement to protect it in perpetuity and all that, but when you're putting together a project budget, and even if you're the offset provider, how do you even calculate that out? Most of our systems will, you know, get to a self-sustaining state in 15, 20 years. Let's say 25. So if you've met the outcomes that are required, there needs to be some flip mechanism that it's still protected, but the monitoring, reporting and the management can slide down to a lower level. And price does matter. And the reason is that politics gets involved. If the price escalates to something that is unbearable, because governments have competing interests. I'll use a suburban development that we worked on a few years ago. The cost of the offset for one solution added $15,000 to the price of a suburban lot. The other solution added $1,500. Now, at the same time, you've got the government saying, well, we'll provide, you know, economically affordable housing. So price does matter when it comes to things like that, because the government's balancing more than just the environment. They're trying to balance all these other things as well. So it's fine to have good, robust discussions and philosophical discussions and all that, but we also need to keep context on reality of where our clients are actually looking at as well.
Yeah, so just to summarise, I guess, some of the key points that we believe in achieving an on-ground offset with a biodiversity outcome. You've got the offset policy framework needs to support that. You need values protection, so you need that legal security or whatever the practical on-ground fencing or items you need there. But there should be a focus on the management of the land, so those incentives to do that, having an adaptive plan, having technical support for the actual landholder that is managing that site, and providing assurance through monitoring. So monitoring not being the tool to the action of monitoring. Monitoring should be providing the assurance that you're on track. And we use a lot of the Northern Australian examples, but it simply is just time. Once you have got the protection in place and you have removed grazing or then it's just time that is required for restoration. So what we've done is we're just posing a question about, once you know how to practically implement an offset on site, how do you go from this model where you have multiple offset sites all around an area? How do you actually create a landscape bioregional or biodiversity improvement that's going to have a more strategic outcome? And I think that when you have a whole lot of developments, there is the opportunity to provide that legacy from a project in terms of biodiversity improvement. So just four key aspects, I suppose, to consider if you move from that single project approach to a bioregional approach. The first one is master planning. So in Queensland, we're very fortunate to have a lot of good resources in terms of bioregional plans, especially if you're looking at a lot of projects in a specific area. An example is the Brigalow Belt of Queensland. There's a lot of mining, coal seam gas projects in that area. So utilising biodiversity state mapping, bioregional assessments, there's also recovery plans, and there's identified areas for protection to build up the national park estate. So I think government has a role here to take an overall approach and provide a strategic plan for that process, and also support policies such as advanced offsets, where those identified offsets can be implemented, those offset sites. The second one is supporting landholders to manage that offset. So once again, the offset management plan, which is a regulatory approval document, there's a big focus, as Chris said, on getting it right, getting the metrics right, getting the calculations matching. But that plan should have the ability to be adaptable to change. You get climate change, fire, those things. And so it should be a management action. Also, once again, the monitoring should assure those outcomes and have that plan for a set time frame. The other one is pooling resources. So at the moment, policy doesn't really support that pooled resource approach, and that could be that a proponent has multiple projects and that they could be offset together, or that multiple other proponents have their offset requirements put together, and in that way you can get a much more scalable project. It's the project we were recently working on, 50% of the approval costs for the project, so that's all the baseline studies and whatever, the offsets cost more than 50% of those overall costs, and those go into legal fees, a lot of contractual management. It's not just the ecology, there's a whole suite of things that are required. So the main driver then for that is a change in policy framework to support that big picture approach, and You need the certainty because you need the approval to be approved, but you also need flexibility to have innovative solutions and creativity when you're trying to look at potential a site which has other values such as connectivity or can support multiple species. So that 80-20 rule that's sort of bandied around a lot, if you can deliver 80% of your requirements but then have a bit of flexibility to find those offset sites that have provide other benefits, I think that's our key point. Thanks.